Well, good evening and welcome to the cooking class for tonight. Tonight's recipe comes from a 1966, our main dish anyway, comes from the 1966 edition of Better Homes and Gardens, America's Favorite Recipes. So tonight we're going to be making crispy walnut tofu. Originally, the recipe is for crispy walnut chicken, but you know I'm not going to do that. However, just as I pointed out last week, we made a dish that was originally another chicken dish. But I subbed tofu for it. You can do that with anything. If you're not into tofu and you're not into plant-based eating just yet, or if you're working your way into it, or you have no plans to do it, but you just like watching cooking shows, you can still use meat. I'm not judging you. However, tonight, instead of the chicken, I'm doing tofu, but you do you, whatever makes you happy. That's what I'll be showing you tonight. But whatever protein you like, you can stick it in there, and it's very, very tasty. It's kind of an Asian-inspired dish. We're also going to be doing some snappy green beans cooked on a real high heat. So they're a little bit blistered, a little bit of soy sauce, a little bit of garlic powder, very tasty. It goes well with the kind of Asian soy theme of the crispy walnut tofu. And then for dessert, we're going to be doing ginger peaches. So I'm going to start the peaches first because they actually have to sit in their poaching or in their soaking liquid for quite some time. So you see I have a little pan here. That's what we're going to do that soaking liquid in, the marinating liquid in. But first I'm going to get the peaches ready. So this is just a regular can of peaches. But notice, you might not be able to see it from here, but these are in juice, not in syrup. If you get the kind that's in heavy syrup, even draining them and rinsing them a little bit, they're going to be way too sweet. So these are in juice instead. So I'm just going to open this can. And you can just have peaches. I'm draining out as much of the liquid as I can. I'm just going to pop them right into this big bowl here. Okay. And then we're going to start the liquid, our cooking liquid going. So again, small saucepan. We'll go ahead and get the heat turned on. It's going to have to be fairly high heat. We want it to reduce. So we start with a half a cup of water and a half a cup of white wine. You can tell I am not using the good stuff for cooking, but it is a reasonable white wine. So half a cup of water, half a cup of white wine, and half a cup of sugar. So it's just 3 halves, half, and half of water, white wine, and sugar. And then as that is starting to come to a boil, I've got a nice, about a thumb-sized chunk of fresh ginger here. And this is my microplane, which is also called a zester. You can see, if you look, it's a very, very fine grater. And this is really good for tough things and also very delicate things like lemon peel. When you're grating a lemon peel, you don't want to get the white pith, that white fuzzy stuff underneath it, because that's very bitter. All you want is the very top layer of lemon peel, because that's where all the fragrant oils are. With ginger, this just grates it extra fine. So we're going to grate this fresh ginger right into the wine and water and sugar mixture. It's very hot. Peaches and ginger are a wonderful flavor combination. You'll make a great cake one of these days. Pull that towards me just a little bit so my hand's not right over that heat. And it does take some time because it is such a fine grater, but it works. You can see all that ginger falling right in there with the wine and the water and the sugar. We're getting there. We're getting there. Okay. Almost there. This part. The reason I keep stopping is that the heat is high, and so it's rising up to meet my hand, and it's really hot. Oh, it smells wonderful already. The wine and the ginger together smell really nice. It's going to be good on those peaches. Okay. So I've got about half of that thumb-sized piece of raw ginger, fresh ginger, all grated up. Make sure all of the liquid and the fibrous stuff from that ginger gets in there. I'm going to bring this to a boil, and then it's going to simmer for a little while and reduce down. While that's doing its thing, I'm going to start on our crispy walnuts. So a little while ago, I got a cup of walnuts, and these are like walnut, big, coarse walnut pieces. I didn't chop them up at all. They're just, right out of the bag of walnut pieces. And I brought them to a boil with just enough water to cover for 2 minutes. And then I drained them out and dried them off. And here they are ready to go. I'm going to toss those with a 1/4 cup of sugar. And the reason that we boil them is to kind of plump them up a little bit. And they'll be a little bit crispier once we fry them. And they're going to take in this sugar a little bit more also. So I'm just stirring them around in that 1/4 cup of sugar. Woo! We have come to a big boil on our peach liquid there. So I brought it down just a bit. That's going to reduce pretty quickly, so I'm going to keep an eye on it. But in the meantime, now that I've tossed that with the sugar, I'm going to get this big pan going on medium-high heat. So on a scale of 1 to 10, actually it's on a scale from low to high, but the numbers in between are 1 to 9. I've got it right at about 7.5. We want it good and hot. So once that comes up to heat, I'm going to put a 1/4 cup of oil in, but we'll get there in just a minute. Behind the ginger liquid here, I've got another pot with water that is just about to come to a boil, really salty water that's just about to come to a boil. That's for our green beans. And I'm going to show you in just a minute how to blanch and shock a vegetable that you plan to stir fry not for very long later. These vegetables, which go into our actual stir fry, are not going to be blanched and shocked, but they're going to be cooked for longer so they don't have to. And I'll explain more about that in just a minute. So as this is coming up, I'm going to go ahead and add a 1/4 cup of canola oil, high heat cooking oil. You don't want to use olive oil for this or any other kind of low heat cooking oil because it will smoke and burn and it will not taste good. So for this, a 1/4 cup of nice neutral high heat cooking oil. And you can tell when oil starts to get really hot, it starts to look kind of shimmery on the bottom of the pan. That's the look we want. So I'm going to wait till it comes up to heat just a little bit more. I'm going to turn the heat up on our ginger syrup just a little bit more. What we're looking for is this to reduce by about half. And it's got a little ways to go before it gets there. So I'm going to turn the heat up on that just a tiny bit. This, I'm going to turn the heat up on because I want a really high rolling boil. Big time boil so that it doesn't cool down too much when we put the green beans in. And the other thing that we need when we are talking about blanching and shocking vegetables is a bowl full of ice water, or water as just about as cold as you can get it, because that's what stops the cooking process. What we're doing here is not thoroughly cooking the beans. What we're doing is dropping them into this boiling water so that they cook just a tiny little bit and their color gets really, really bright, beautiful, vivid green, which is what we want. Because when we cook them later, all we're doing really is just blistering the outsides and heating them up all the way through. We're not really thoroughly cooking them. So this is what we're going to do. So this is getting really hot. I'm going to go ahead and toss my sugared walnuts in there, and they are sizzling. Yay. Okay. So because they're covered in sugar, that sugar is starting to melt already. And since it's relatively high heat, we're going to keep stirring, because we don't want them to burn. That would be bad. It smells wonderful. And this is what's going to add that really interesting note to our stir fry later. The stir fry itself is fairly basic, and I'll show you the sauce when we get to the sauce part. It's pretty ordinary. But these crispy, sweet, and then salty, we're going to salt them after they come out of the oil. These crispy, sweet, and salty walnuts on the top, along with that crispy tofu that's part of the actual stir fry, Makes it really something special. So I'm just keeping an eye on these, and I'm watching as this sugar, I can't bring the camera over to show you, but I'm watching as these sugar crystals start to melt and start to caramelize. That's really what we're looking for, because that's what's going to give them a really rich flavor. In addition to the walnuts themselves getting nice and brown and toasty, that sugar is also going to contribute to that toastiness. So while they're doing that, when I get my green beans, my water over here is at a really good rolling boil. It's all the way up, and it's well salted too. You want to make sure of that. So this is about 1/2 pound of green beans. I'm dropping those into the boiling water, and there we will keep them for about 1 minute. And in 1 minute-ish, I'll show you what to do next. So this is a really fun meal that makes you feel like you need several more hands, but it really is manageable because it's all on the stove top. Everything except for the tofu, which I crisped up in the oven earlier. And that's exactly what I did last week when we made last week's dish. 400 degrees, a little bit of oil and soy sauce and cornstarch on that cubed and pressed out tofu. And then 10 minutes, flip them over, another 10 minutes, and you have perfectly crispy cubes of tofu that can go in just about anything you like. So this is starting to get really hot and really sticky. So I'm going to switch from that to a wooden utensil that I know is not going to melt or burn. It's also got a little bit more surface area so that I can stir it around a little bit more effectively. So the sugar is turning golden brown and caramelized. It looks absolutely beautiful and delicious. And it smells absolutely wonderful. And it's starting to get nice and toasty brown. Aside from sugar, the walnuts themselves are getting a really nice toasty color. These have been in for about a minute, so I'm going to turn the heat off in the back. So you can see from just a minute in that water, that boiling water, they're bright green. We want to keep them that way. So we're going to stop the cooking process by taking them right out of the boiling water and putting them right into this really, really cold ice water. It's a cool technique. So blanching is the boiling part. Shocking is the cold part. And this works on any vegetable. This is good for vegetables that you want to put into salad as well, because it cooks it just enough to be a little bit toothsome, but it doesn't make it mushy, and it keeps the color really bright and fresh. So now that we're done with that, we are right at a perfect point of these crispy, sugary, delicious walnuts. So I'm going to turn the heat to about medium low, because we're going to need this pan again in a minute with all those good walnutty and sugary juices in there. But I'm going to scrape out the walnuts and as much sugar as I can in this slotted spatula here. And I'm going to spread it out carefully, it's very sticky, on this paper towel so it can drain. You can hear it sizzling. So it's a little bit like a very informal walnut griddle. Pile it on. It's okay to leave some of that sugar in there because the sauce for the stir fry requires a little bit of sugar anyway. All right. Actually, it's going to be a minute before I need this pan again. So I'm going to go ahead and shut it off. And then what I'm going to do is take my salt. So you might not be able to see it from here, but here are our crispy walnuts just kind of draining on the paper towel. And I'm sprinkling salt over them because we want them to be both sweet and salty. Wonderful flavor profile there. So now that those are done, I'm going to give our ginger mixture a stir. It is starting to reduce nicely and it's getting a little bit thick, which is good. And I'm going to take the beans out of their bath, their ice water bath, and set them aside for later. We want them to be dry. We'll dry them off more thoroughly when it comes time to cook them. But an enemy of good frying is excess moisture in whatever food it is that you hope to fry. If it's wet, it's going to steam, not fry, especially if it's not in a batter coating. A batter coating actually keeps a nice barrier from the natural moisture that's in food and the oil that you're frying it in. But if you're cooking something like a vegetable, there is no coating on there to keep that from happening. And so what happens is you don't get a nice crispy outside on whatever it is. It just steams, it gets kind of soggy. Sometimes you want a softer outside on it, but if you're trying to fry it, make sure that whatever you do that's being fried, you dry it off first. So we're going to go ahead and get a dish towel, a nice big one, and get these green beans, some of this water soaked out of it or dried out of it, so that when it comes time to fry them up, they will fry and not steam and get all soggy. So I'm just pressing these green beans inside a dish towel. I'll show you. Inside this dish towel right here, spread them out evenly over one side, like this bottom half, and then just press as much of the water out as you can without squashing the vegetable. And since we don't need them right this second, we'll set them right there. I dropped one, alas. Okay. So this is starting to reduce really nicely. And I'm going to go ahead and have that over here. There's still just a kind of little peanut or walnut pieces in here I want to get out. Ooh, very sticky. And this has reduced about by half. So what I'm going to do is turn the heat off. This is the white wine and water and sugar and ginger. And here are my peaches out of the can. I'm going to flip them so that the pit side is up because they'll hold more that way. And this is a sieve or a strainer. And I'm going to pour this syrup very carefully through this strainer right on top of these peaches. Okay. And since we use that strainer, they're not going to be big chunks of anything left in there. It'll just be a really smooth, delightful, sweet syrup, which is what we have here. So I'm going to let the peaches do their thing right over here. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about cutting vegetables. So in the recipe that I will post later tonight, it talks about vegetables being bias cut. If any of you have ever done any sewing, you might know what the word bias means in this context. Someone's waiting to come in.
I'm sorry, whoever was on Zoom.
So if you know anything about sewing, you'll know that bias means on a diagonal. When you're cooking something really dense like this, like a carrot or like a piece of winter or fall squash, or anything else that's denser than something like, say, a cauliflower or a green pepper, something that is more solid, it's best to cut it on a bias. Why? Because it gives you more surface area. So anything that you're hoping that will all cook at the same time. And here I have mushrooms, which are almost all water. I have Brussels sprouts, which are not as watery, but they've got lots and lots of layers. So they cook pretty quickly if you cut them up. And you'll notice they're cut into quarters. I have cauliflower, which is very fluffy, and parts of it are dense, like the stem part is dense, but it doesn't take very long to cook if you cut it small. And then these carrots, which are the densest by far out of any of these, but this is why we're cutting them on a bias. So if you have a carrot or some other vegetable and you lay it down in front of you, instead of cutting it this way with a knife perpendicular to you and not cutting it parallel, because that would just be weird, you have it at an angle. So when you cut, you're exposing, get the end off there, you're exposing a whole lot of surface area. So the deeper your angle, the longer that piece is. So rather than cutting just horizontal circles out of it, which don't have as much surface area, you've got one long, skinny bias cut piece of carrot. So I'm just going to cut the rest of the carrot like this. And that's why when you see, most of the time when you see stir fries from Chinese restaurants, their celery and their carrots and a lot of their other long, thin, but dense vegetables are cut just that way. You can do eggplant that way, you can do squash that way, and it cooks much more evenly and much more quickly if you cut it with, so it has the maximum amount of surface area. So in here, we've got about 2 cups of mixed chopped vegetables, and all cut about the same size. And we've also got 3 nice scallions, also bias cut, because again, surface area, caramelization, good flavor, all of that good stuff. And we're going to come over here and we're going to start our vegetables. So I'm going to get the heat back up on this, but I don't want it that high to start with because I don't want the sugar and the oil to burn in here. So I'm going to do about medium to start. And also I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of vegetable broth. This is the homemade vegetable broth that I make. And the way I do that is I eat a lot of vegetables. And so I prep a lot of vegetables. So all of the trimmings that I have, and I know, I'm pretty sure I've showed you in my freezer before what this looks like, but every time I prep vegetables, all of the scraps, the carrot peelings, the tops and bottoms of those, even Brussels sprout leaves, broccoli stems, all of the stuff that I'm not going to cook and eat as is, I put it in a bag and I put it in the freezer. And then when I have a full freezer of all of these vegetable scraps, I put them in a big pot, I pour water on them, I bring it to a simmer and let it simmer for about 20 or 30 minutes or so. And then I have homemade vegetable stock. It's not only easy, it's also a great way to avoid too much waste. So I get as much as I possibly can out of all of the vegetables that I use. I do avoid some vegetables because they're strongly flavored or they're strangely flavored or they would take over the whole soup. But onions, always. Mushrooms, always. Peppers, always. Carrots, always. Celery, although I don't eat a lot of celery because I don't like it. But I have been known to buy celery for a specific purpose. And then since I know I won't eat the rest of it, I'll just chop it up and put it in the freezer so that when I make this vegetable stock later, I can use it up and not waste it. So it's a really great way to get rid of your vegetables and also end up with really good quality homemade vegetable stock at the end. All that to say, we have 1 1/4 cups of that vegetable stock here. I'm going to add 1/2 cup of that carefully. To our pan. And then we're going to put in all of these vegetables and start them cooking. I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit. Now that we have liquid in there that keeps that sugar and that oil from burning and frying, I'm going to turn that heat back up. I'm going to start these vegetables cooking. So now that those are going, I'm going to raise that. Now that those are going, I'll show you how we're going to do the green beans. Now that the green beans are over there and they're dry, I've got my cast iron skillet here. And I'm going to keep that at pretty high heat. It's at medium-high heat, which is good because what we're looking for is the kind of green beans that you would find in a Chinese restaurant where they're a little bit charred, a little bit blistered, and they have that really nice, rich flavor from being cooked deeply. That's what we're going for. So, get my vegetables going here. It smells wonderful. There was a good bit of celery in that last batch of vegetable stock. So that's kind of coming through and it's fine as a flavor. I just don't like the texture of raw or cooked celery ever, pretty much at all. I'm going to try a little snippet of these walnuts. They look so tasty. I have to try it. Oh, I don't want to put it on the tofu. I just want to eat it. That's wonderful. So in our saucepan, our cast iron pan here, I'm going to add just enough oil to barely coat the bottom of the pan. I'm also going to have on hand some garlic powder. Now, garlic powder is a lifesaver because there's sometimes where you are cooking something at high heat, and the worry is if you burn your garlic, you have to throw away everything or suffer the consequences of burned garlic, and it is not tasty. So garlic powder and garlic salt, I use a lot because you don't have that risk. You can have the flavor of your garlic without worrying about burning it when you're cooking something at a high heat, which is what we plan to do with these green beans. I'm going to let this get good and hot, And while that's working, we're going to make the sauce for the stir fry. So with the vegetable broth that you have left, and you can use chicken stock if you would rather, but we have that. We're going to add a teaspoon of sugar. Not much, because remember, we already have some sugar in the pan left over from when we made the walnuts. Okay. We're going to add a tablespoon of cornstarch, because that's what's going to make it a nice thick sauce. We're going to add a quarter cup of soy. That's going to give it a nice rich flavor. There. 2 tablespoons of Chinese cooking wine. You can also use cooking sherry or another kind of cooking wine. I much prefer this, the Shaojing cooking wine. It has a very, if you're used to eating Chinese food, you will recognize the flavor as soon as you start using it. So 2 tablespoons of that. Believe me when I tell you, it's not something you want to actually drink, so don't bother. And a half teaspoon of 5-spice powder, Chinese 5-spice powder, which is pretty easy to find. I think they have it in regular grocery stores. I know they have it in Asian markets, and it's a really nice blend that tastes, again, if you like eating Chinese food out in restaurants or getting takeout, you will recognize the flavors. And it's one of those things that gives it kind of that authentic flavor when you're making it at home. You can also use just powdered ginger though, if you like, and that will give you a good flavor also. So remember, when we make anything with cornstarch, we have to make sure that the cornstarch is dissolved. Otherwise, you will be lumpy, 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 and nobody wants lumpy sauce. So while that's doing its thing, I'm going to give these vegetables a stir. They're cooking really nicely. And what we're hoping for and what is happening is that the liquid is getting cooked out, and these vegetables are getting nice and delicious and soaked in a little bit of that walnut flavored oil and a little bit of that sugar that was left, and they're soaking up the flavor of that delicious vegetable broth. So that's exactly where you want it. I'm going to test the heat. Oh yeah. So here we have our beautiful dried green beans. Put them back in the pan, and you can see how beautifully they kept their color. That is exactly what we're looking for right there. And from here, we have our tongs. We have our hot, hot, hot oil. In they go. And we're going to spread them out so that they cook nice and evenly. So you can hear them, I think, even, I hope, through your computer screen. And to give them a little bit of salt and a little bit of flavor, we did salt the oil or the water that they were blanched in, which is great because you want them to be kind of infused with that salty flavor. We're also going to add a little bit of soy. Oh yeah. And a little bit of this garlic powder. Okay. And using our tongs, oh, this is beautiful. These are wonderful. So they're getting a really deep color from this hot, hot, hot oil. It smells divine. Okay. So while they're doing their thing, I'm going to make sure the heat is cranked up here. This liquid, which we started with, that little half cup of broth that we started with, is almost completely gone from these vegetables. And the vegetables are nice and tender, but they're not at all soggy, so they cook perfectly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push them out in like a wreath all the way around the sides of the pan so that they stay hot, but so that I have a nice big empty, very hot spot in the middle of the pan. I'm going to take the sauce mixture and pour it right in. And let that come to a boil right in the middle until that cornstarch starts to thicken. Oh my, look at these. These are gorgeous green beans. So let me show you a perfect specimen here. So you can see it's still got that bright green color on the bottom, but it also, you can see those beautiful, it's starting to get a little bit blistered from the heat of the cast iron, and that soy sauce is starting to caramelize on there a little bit. So these are done. That was it. Blanching, shocking, and about 2 minutes in a very, very hot skillet with a little bit of oil, a little bit of soy, a little bit of garlic powder, and those are done. So I don't have to do anything else to those. Here, this sauce is getting nice and thick. Oh, it's beautiful. This really deep, fragrant. I'm stirring the vegetables back in now. Okay. Really nice, thick sauce. I've got my crispy tofu that was baked earlier right here. Turn the heat off and incorporate that. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right, I have ready, it just so happens that I have some nice rice that I made earlier right here. So I've got a bed of rice on this side. Grab my tongs, and a nice little sheaf of these beautifully blackened, but not burned, green beans on the side. Got a nice big spoon over here. Where are you, big spoon? There you go. A nice big spoon full of sauce and vegetables and tofu here. Love that sauce. Gotta have more of that sauce. Oh yeah. So a good generous helping there. I'm gonna take, whoa, they all stuck together. Hooray. That's how you know it's working. So these crispy, sweet, and salty walnuts. Pull those off. It's not sticking too badly. They're sticking to my hands, that's all. So we have these crispy, sweet, and salty walnuts going right on top. My furry little sous chef is eating the ones I've dropped. That's the greatest part about having a dog. You never have to worry about cleaning your floor. So a generous helping of those walnuts on the top. Look how beautiful this plate is. So we've got these gorgeous green beans. We've got our stir fry with the crispy walnuts on the top. And then to finish off our meal, everything's off. You know what? I can use this bowl. I'm going to grab a bowl, a slotted spoon, and earlier I have some crystallized ginger, some candied ginger, and I just minced that up very finely. So I'm going to take one of these beautiful peaches. And when peaches are in season, certainly you can make these with fresh peaches. I would encourage you actually to make it with fresh peaches. That would be delightful. So I'm going to set these right here. Get a little bit of that nice, thick, sweet syrup on the top. A little bit of this crystallized minced ginger and sprinkle that there. Easy, so easy and so beautiful. And if you serve this to people, they will think you spent a lot more time than you did. So right here, what do we clock in at? 33 minutes. The only thing that was done beforehand was cutting the vegetables and baking that tofu and boiling the walnuts. But those are all 2 to 5 minute jobs. So I would say if you started right from the beginning, in 45 minutes, you have dinner. Especially if you have, well, rice, the rice you can make in 45 minutes easily. So here you have it, a 3-course meal, your stir fry with rice, your green beans, and your dessert of ginger peaches, all ready in 34 minutes with just a little bit of advanced prep time. That's what we have for dinner. But you know what? Let me try it, because I hate to leave you hanging. So I don't want you to wonder if it was any good or not. So I'm going to get some rice, make sure I get a walnut on there, and a little bit of that crispy tofu with the sauce, and try and squeeze a carrot on there. Oh no, it's all falling off. I don't know if I can get it all. Here, I'll get a Brussels sprout instead. Okay, so here we have tofu and Brussels sprout and rice and walnut and plenty of sauce. The walnuts. The walnuts and the 5 spice powder in the sauce. How? That's incredible. I'm going to get a little bit of these green beans here. Nice and blistered, beautifully cooked. Here are my green beans. Salty. I could have used either a little bit less salt in the boiling water or a little bit less soy sauce, but it tastes really good. And then let's try our gingered peaches. I'll make sure I get lots of the syrup in there and some specks of that crystallized ginger on there. Perfect light, spicy note, not too sweet, surprisingly. Perfect spicy note with the main course and the green beans. That's it, guys. This is easy. Recipes will be posted on my website and also on the All Saints Church website, and I'll make sure you get a link to it on the church Facebook page and on the Plant-Based Priest Facebook page. Until next week, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I hope you get a chance to try this, and I hope you enjoy it when you do. Remember, you were created for love, by love, so please go out and be love. Have a wonderful night, everyone. See you next week.